So what I just wanted to do is give you guys some background. We're on day 31 of a 30-day experience where we basically built this whole DVD way. We've implemented it. We had a massive presentation to the business directors yesterday. Fortunately, Christine was here to join us, so we've asked her to join as well. She's handling the change and awareness and measurement and elements like that on the project that we're integrating. And the background, we did a case study with our new data management office, and you can see all of the steps that we have. And if you look, these elements over here, these are what we call the submissions. So they are actually the clauses in the regulatory submissions that we need to submit data for. And you can see it's all over. And hopefully, last week when we shared a little bit about the taxonomy, we were talking about the different submissions and the mapping between the regulatory submission for the NDMO, which is the national regulator for Saudi, and then also to map that to the DMBOK. And so you can see a lot of the work that's been done and the different mappings. I'm just ticking off every single regulation that we were able to do. We were very fortunate to be able to deliver 45 submissions in the space of 30 days. So that's been a fantastic achievement. I think we need a lot of sleep when we go back home, and we're starting to travel back home tonight. So we wanted to, that's why we moved it to Wednesday. Apologies for that. And yeah, just to say thank you to the team. I know Paul Bolton's on there as well. Paul, if you mind putting your screen on, if you can, and JG and Christine for making it a really intense engagement. But what an amazing learning experience. So just before we switch over, would you like to share anything, Christine, in your journey?
I've never seen such hard work, commitment, and dedication. I came in towards the end, and I must just hand it to you, James. The fact that we're still friends after that kind of stress means that we are good people.
Yeah.
We can handle it. That's all from my side.
Anything
Well done.
Anything from your side, Paul? What's your observation? How's it been for you, the 30 days of non-stop work?
I just remember the hot air outside when I leave late at night, and it still hits you hard. But no, it's been incredible, Howard, and just credit to you guys, JG, Howard, and also the local team. You know, just the learning curve has been intense, as well as the experience has been wonderful. And you know, just seeing for me a lot of the concepts just coming alive as I'm working. That's the pace that we had to work at. No time to figure out. Sometimes just keep going and rocking. So thanks for keep driving us. And yeah, I think we hit that milestone in time, or actually with days to spare, which was when I wiped my eyes. I was like, how did we do that? But that was awesome. So thanks to everybody. It's been great.
Anything from your side, sir?
Yeah, maybe the fact, just acknowledging great hard work, great teamwork, really special times, those ones that you remember because they were so hard. But there've been a couple of moments where the client, you can just see the lights go on for the client.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how that's just energized me to know that like our effort's not in vain. In vain. And
Is it vain?
It's in vain. It's not in vain. And so to get to the point of being able to deliver is massive, but just to see the way the client's going, oh my word, is this what my role entails? Number one. So there was a realization of the person needing to run the equivalent of an EIM or a data management office. And then also the way the business has responded to this initiative of the data management office, which is new to them. So it's new, it's just so new. And so it's been a privilege to be able to guide at this fledgling stage and guide people that are so keen and so excited to make their data work hard. So it's been a real privilege and great fun. And we're looking forward to sharing the last session today with you, which is in and around the perspective from the data executive. Yeah. And we've had some great sessions with their data executives. Yeah. Thanks, Al.
Excellent. Thank you, JG. Could you take over and start presenting? Because you don't want to drive this.
Okay.
So whilst JG is just getting running, we had a really amazing presentation to those people that are going to become voting members on the data management committee. And yesterday we brought in all the different people from the business and had a really amazing session of understanding the challenges that they face with data, what they're wanting to achieve, how excited they are that this program is coming along. And then also just noticing the difference of opinion across the different players and realizing how important the change is going to be, and this transition we're going to have to take them through. So now that we've got a lot of the planning and we're going with policies and that, it's now time to operationalize and get everything sorted out. So always nice to go through those type of experiences and get that position and then do that presentation to the board. I know Christine probably has a little bit to share about that engagement. It was mind-blowing to us in terms of just the engagement. Anything you'd like to?
I think for me, I mean, how would you know this? When we've dealt with that level, so these were director levels, they are just the level below the key top.
Yeah.
Very difficult. First of all, they're never available. They never pay attention. They always come late. They're highly resistant. Well, 17 of them, our socks were blown off yesterday.
Yeah, I think we invited 5 or 6 and we had 17.
You know, we invited 17 with only a day's notice. And we expected, okay, 5 arrived, it's fine. So of course we ran out of time, but every single one of the people spoke in English, were very clear to articulate their challenges and their aspirations where it came to data.
Yeah.
So they already thought about it. So not only did we not have resistance, we had massive attendance, which would take months to get right sometimes, especially in governments. And then the best thing is their eagerness. So now we're actually sitting with a problem where they are wanting it all like yesterday. And we say, whoa, we've got to do the work first, the foundation, governance stuff. So we're going to have to manage expectations there because they're just rearing ahead.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
So fantastic. So thanks, Christine.
Mr. Gorman, was that funny?
Yep.
Careful the problems you want.
Yeah, be careful what you ask for, because when you get it, you don't know what to do with it.
Fantastic. So maybe just for context today is the last of our round of the data-driven way. And for those that are new to the call, highly recommend the webinars that will be published. But I thought it would just be really powerful for us to set the scene for the data executive and the challenges that come at that data executive. So what we're looking at here, just to lay the foundation, is that we started right at the beginning with a principle of the path, and it says that any action that you take will result in an outcome. And it might be the outcome that you want, and if it isn't, the only way to change is to reverse your direction and go the other way. And particularly with data, it doesn't fix itself. You need to fix it through an engineering type process. So it's the principle of the path is the path that you walk to get yourself in trouble, you actually have to walk it to get out. And so we introduced this construct that there are two paths that operate concurrently. And the one is the construct of a data asset. And that is, we're quite familiar with that. It's like, oh, it's an incredibly valuable report or analysis or some or other, I'm going to call it golden nugget, which gives you an insight you didn't have before, translates into an action that's valuable to the business. It's what we aim for and what we try and make sure that a data product delivers on. So a data asset we can relate to, we get it. What's been really interesting through the process of this product is the asset, the valuation, the importance of the data management direction. And so we're saying that the principle of the path, when it comes to data management, you've got to keep oversight of two things: the data asset, as we know it to be the analytics, and then the process to get confident in the analytics and to get the analytics at scale. And that's where we realized that we needed to come into an environment who has a regulatory pressure. They need to deliver against regulatory requirement. And we don't have the time to go through the conventional process. And it was at that point we went, what needs to be true to actually impose an agile type process on the data management function? And if one were to think about what if we hold the principle of the path, and we embrace an agile type process with the construct of a use case, what needs to be true for use cases to fly through the system and deliver value in small bite-sized chunks as we would expect through an agile sprint? And so that mindset brought us to quickly that we needed to bring in the construct of a playbook. And I'm going to touch on that during today's course, today's session, because we haven't needed to go to that in detail. And we on last week's call, we considered, how it posed the question to us: is there actually a recipe to implement a data maturing process in an institution against a recipe? Because we know that the Dama wheel is circular. You can start wherever you like, or you can start in different places. Howard, I remember you posed the question to Mark. Mark went, sure, Howard, if you posed that question to me, I think I would start with data strategy and a bit of this. And so what came apparent to me on that, through that question to the audience, was there are quite a few perspectives and opinions as to where you would start. And we had the additional challenge of a data management office with new parties, just recently graduated CMP, given a responsibility of running a data management office for a massive ministerial function, who has set as one of their targets, they want to be the data leader amongst all the ministers. So how's that for setting the foundation of terrifying for a particular person? And so, Howard, I thought, you've engendered a level of trust the way you've walked with the person whose job this is. And so, based on that, from a trust perspective, we felt a huge responsibility to lay a foundation that was manageable and applicable. So
maybe just to share, I know Veronica's online, but when we were training in November, October of last year, one of the ladies came to us and said she really needs help, and she's got like 5 or 6 years of business experience, but she's been put into this position to lead the data management office, doing a fantastic job, but really desperate to do it right, do it properly, understand. And it's amazing to see the growth that they've gone through in this process of helping establish, get the submissions done, and then walk us through the process from start to finish. And we've noticed how having a recipe and a playbook, one of our first challenges, Caroline, you would relate to this, is what do you mean by a playbook? And what do you mean by a game plan? And what do you mean by a play? And now the sporting activity is not very high.
Yeah, you can't use that as an analogy.
And so the analogy sort of fell flat, and we were now trying to find ways of describing playbooks and game plans and elements like that. So there were these added challenges of terminology and issues like that. But just to say that she's doing a tremendous job. She's really, it's amazing to see the youth leading so often. And just the backdrop there was we were talking to other people in the field and on how the youth has really stepped up into this area with Saudi, and we didn't realize sometimes that some of the language and not being able to communicate in English has held transformation back, and now it's dropped, and there's a lot of this movement happening. But let me not.
Perfect. So 4 weeks in, we looked at data management, we looked at data citizen, we looked at data professional, and we looked through the lens of the data driven. The data value-driven management process. And so when we look at that through the lens of an executive, the beauty is that this principle is universal. We can say it's global. Every single data executive is looking for the same things. And I want to highlight the messaging on the top right-hand corner. It's the decisions that matter get made promptly and well. And what I think we've ate, slept, and drunk that statement in the last 30 days. And there's lots in it. The decisions, it's an active process that matter. It's against priority, get made promptly and well. And those are really interesting things. And so we're going to use this as our mantra to hold on to during the course of this presentation, because in essence, as an executive, I need to resolve issues, but I need to always look at them through the lens that matters, because some issues are very difficult to resolve if I don't hold a perspective of value and whether they matter to the business. And so this slide is a really nice landing slide in terms of it's the statements of fact that would happen if everything was working well. It's so much easier to hit our goals, and I can see the trends coming. And we've actually just walked out of a meeting with the CDO of this environment, and it was interesting that these are some of the words coming out of his mouth in terms of what he wants.
So we just have a question from Caroline.
Yeah.
Caroline, I see you put your hand up. Did JG
Yeah,
answer?
sorry, am I the only one? I'm only seeing training events, that Debbie put up. I'm seeing a slide for training events. I'm not seeing whatever.
Sorry, thank you for doing that. I think you're on the wrong team session. But you're picking it up.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Let
Okay.
me.
Oh, I'm not. I was just saying I'm on the wrong team session. I was like, how does that work?
No. Sorry. No, you're not. So this was. Okay, you can plan it out.
Perfect. So what we're going to do today is have a look at the data-driven way through the perspective of the executive. And the goal, as we said, was those feelings of elation. Is like it's easier to hit my objectives. This particular slide is so. Can I go back? Yes. So we're going to walk through the following 5 value statements, and I'm hoping that you will just kind of stay with us in terms of within this within the frame of mind that an executive enters these discussions. Is the value aligned? Can I define it? Can I define it? Can I find it? Can I drive it? Can I bake it? And so I'm going to try and make those 5 verbs come alive within the context of this project, and then open it up for discussion. So in terms of aligning value, I had an opportunity to present to this forum on ESG a couple of months ago. And what I found interesting is when we look at some of the fundamental drivers, and I'm looking at the top left column here, is when we need to align to value, there is a global trend of sustainability alignment and sustainability and valuing sustainability to the extent that it drives countries and regions. And so if we then look at the next little tile on our grid, the regional response, and this in particular, the Gulf response, is as a result of the sustainability driver, there's the realization that oil can no longer be seen as, there needs to be an opportunity, it needs to be oil plus. And one of the things that has become very clear is the Gulf region recognizes their economic value proposition to globally is one of their position in terms of being a logistics hub for the area. And we see that manifest through one of the Gulf states, and that's where we find ourselves. Saudi is the country's ambition defines a very aggressive 2030 goal. And that 2030 goal hinges on needing to transform the resources available. And 3 resources in particular is there's a massive initiative to build competency and capability from a data utilization perspective within its people, or amongst its constituents, in particular its people. And so the investment taking place in AI in particular, and I'll walk through some of that. So we use AI as the endpoint, but the entire data management process, and how this for me was fascinating, is that the country really focuses on the data management process and not just this kind of like vaporware of promise of some sophisticated analytics. The next thing is the land utilization. So they're recognizing their land as an asset. And we find ourselves in a ministry that is all about transforming its land asset to being highly profitable hubs for enterprise and industry. And then the distribution of the fiscal assets in terms of how they manage and how they manage to deploy financing for these initiatives. Investment options for this goal. Coming into the middle of this little grid is the stakeholder accountability. It's been really interesting that the stakeholder accountability runs all the way from government through to industry and then through into the social engagement, the social compact. And so stakeholder accountability is interesting, considering that we're in a kingdom versus we're in a kingdom, which means that sometimes you respond to a decree rather than considering that it's an optional engagement. And so what's really interesting is to sit in the kingdom and see the power of a decree when it comes to leveraging assets which are different to those that were leveraged in the past, for example, oil. And then what's been fascinating is defining a galvanizing goal. And I've just highlighted 3 of them, but they're quite illustrative in terms of where the intent is. The little left icon is open data has been recognized as one of the key accelerants to value driven within the country's context. And open data is you get incentivized to publish. In fact, it's not incentivized, it's open data first. By default. So if you find that you have a data asset within your environment that is eligible to be available for open data, it needs to pass the test of it can't have PDP type constraints. It needs to be valuable to the country, but you are therefore by almost it's open data first. If it's possible to be open data, it's got to go because they've seen the accelerated capacity that comes when you distribute open data elements.
But then our challenge becomes at this stage, a lot of them, Don, you may be interested in with their data, the air quality and things like that. They're wanting to charge money for it, or they are charging money for it, and then the guys are saying, "Whoa, hold on." The first thing is open for free, and then you start looking at monetizing. So now they're in this debate of, "Oh, how do I unravel this? And if it's basic data, how do I make that open and free? And then how do I charge for the other stuff?" So they're battling to understand where to put the value or the monetization of the assets.
And that becomes and for those that are interested in terms of how one goes about the value realization, it immediately demands a question are we fit enough to value open data against those attributes of brand collateral, of participation within a country specific goal. Yeah. And so if you just evaluated that under this construct of I could earn X amount if I just submitted that data element and billed for it, that use case has to be considered against brand equity and against alignment. So fascinating challenge that comes when you take on open data, but I think we as a DAMA group recognize the acceleration possibilities that come when you embrace open data. I've used this little AI tag as there are specifically 300 AI startups that that's the goal. They need 300 AI startups and it needs to happen between now and 2027, and then they want another increment to that. So that's interesting. What I thought was fascinating is this last one is they are looking to be in the top 20 countries publishing AI documentation, research documentation, which means that there's a long-term view on what they're looking to do here. So
that's the top 10 in open data.
Open data, top 10 open data on the left, top 20 in terms of publications on the right. And so that's the level of seriousness with which you need to take on moving your region, your potentially your economy from where it was oil to where it could be data. So how do you get that right? And there's another testimony to how do you do that, and that's the network effect. And these 4 icons represent ministerial, I want to call it associations, but I think I've got the name wrong.
Ministries, the different levels and
types of ministries. And here you've got this ranging from the focus on creating data assets, knowing that you need master data, knowing that you need collective data, knowing that you need some advanced analytics type techniques to leverage the opportunities. And so there's this network effect and accountability against that. Now, that's all good. And this is where we found our project comes in, and we've used our data value driven weight as an icon for the construct of scale. Because actually, Howard, I think that's where my aha moment was, is you want to, if you are serious with this as a canvas for initiating or bringing initiatives to the table, how does it scale?
Yeah.
And that's what I thought this data value driven way really reinforced, is the use cases, the scale, the intensity, the speed.
And maybe also just to give you a review, we did a maturity assessment to start off with, and it looked terrible. So when you do the maturity assessment, one looks at across the DMBOK wheel on all the capabilities, and it's pretty low. So not only are we looking to scale, but we're also trying to enforce a level of maturity as we build, and that's well recognized. So we've got this translation of being able to run at pace with multiple use cases, but then also to uplift the capabilities at the same time. So
that's it, sure. And then with anything, the accountability to adjust based on your cost benefit analysis. And so what's been a really interesting part of this process is the way that all initiatives have led with the actual commercials, and making sure that any initiative, if you're going to call something a data product, it must stand the test of a product. It must be able to be marketed, sold, valued, innovated.
And this is where the taxonomy came, and it's just a pity you can't see on the back slide where we showed how the grain changed from use case portfolio to use case to data elements, and then we dropped up to into data quality, and then we had verified the data set. From data set, we then said the only time you get into a catalog is if you're a data asset, and then you have to go from the data asset catalog into a data product where you are making money. So we had this taxonomy of the data elements and components becoming data assets, and we had to a data product you had to now start making money or reducing costs of doing something. And just that mindset of them recognizing the change of the data they were dealing with also helps. And I've heard that testimony of saying, you may not be able to price it 100% now, but as soon as you take a value approach to your data, and I think Doug Laney was saying that, all of a sudden your thinking changes. Everybody's recognition of what they're dealing with is something different, not just a whole lot of data in a database.
And we'll show you just now about how we took some of the use cases through a payback period analysis and return on investment. So I just thought that it would really be useful to just offer us in the closing slide or the closing time of this particular data value driven way, this little grid of how all the way from a global trend, this thing, you can traverse every aspect of the environment that you find yourself. And this is purely just an example from this project, but I'm hoping that as we were walking through this, you were able to think about your clients and your situation and your initiative, and look at the way in which the goals align all the way back to those strategic goals that have long horizons to them and therefore have high impact and high valuation over time. So if we then go to the slide we would have seen a little bit earlier on, I think we stored within the citizen realm. And what it does is it highlighted to us that we needed to make sure that our data management process was aligned to business. And all I did was I highlighted from that previous slide of all of these kind of relatively, you know, even if you can't relate to them, no, there's ministries, there's industries, and there's sectors within those industries that are causing this galvanized picture, or the causing alignment. And I would encourage anybody working within any providing data management service to any South African or other country, other company, you know, have a look for what your business alignment is, and look for those 4 or 5 factors. Try and get it deeper. The higher and deeper you can align, the more robust your business case can be. So that's been particularly encouraging. So we're on a project here. We know it's going to last for a long time because of its alignment is so high.
Okay.
Good. So I just highlight this as a slide to illustrate how the grid of alignment actually comes down to that data value-driven direction.
And just to make it a little bit more real, whenever we build and we add use cases to our use case portfolio that's going to be prioritized using data value, we have to link it up to a vertical alignment. So we allocate an owner, and then we say, okay, this data strategy is linked to this digital strategy, which is part of Industry 4.0, and it's linked to that business strategy. And then it's what is your link to your country strategy, being Sadaya and the different elements like that. So you're constantly forced to justify and explain why this use case is so important and why we should look at it.
And that brings us a great segue to the next part of the discussion, is that sometimes you've got a great use case, but it has got some challenges that need to be overcome before you can offer value, or excuse me, before you can realize the value that it potentially can have. And this is where we needed to bring in the construct of a playbook, that the data value-driven way runs against a playbook. And we realized, to your point earlier, the sporting theme didn't work.
Yeah.
So Terence, we couldn't talk about how we were going to scrum or have a lineup in terms of our playbook. It didn't work. So we went across to a music theme because it was more relatable. And we think that it really, in fact, we didn't go across. Christine said,
Yes, that's the day.
Christine came along and realized and said, guys, you bunch of South Africans speaking to some poor, poor Saudi ladies, you're losing it. So Christine, it was wonderful. It was really wonderful the way you were able to pick up the fact that we needed a term to make it relevant, and you really helped us land this music analogy. So it was really special working with communication on this. It was awesome.
So the cultural sensitivity was one thing, but you took that and ran with it.
Yeah, we ran.
You know, yeah.
Cool. So what we have here is we highlighted the fact that we have instruments that can be tuned either to be relevant for a rock concert or a symphony. The outcome is a completely different sound, but the instruments that you use are sometimes very similar. It's the way you tune them. And that construct was critically important for what we needed next. Is we needed a way to communicate to the business that, as aspirational as your use case is to deliver value, there's a slight challenge that we need to start with. And that is that what I'm calling on the top right, this quality innovation dilemma, is we would love to innovate, but sometimes innovation is hamstrung by quality. But if we do the quality step well, we get acceleration on the innovation. And so we needed to bring in this construct of a playbook which says, as much as we are all aligned to innovate, and you've heard these country aspirations are huge, the pressure on this team is massive to meet those country goals. They're altruistic, obtainable if you do things right, but really difficult. And this is where this playbook construct was really useful, is we needed to introduce the construct of a playbook, which says we may need to bias a significant amount of our time initially to sort out a quality element. But the beauty here, Howard, was not for your entire universe of data elements, just for the 4 data elements that we've been able to recognize that we need for this use case. And so this is where this the data-driven way was so powerful, because we came with a use case. I think you can see it here. this use case here. And then the moment we went into this step, we just dropped. There are only 2 data elements that we need, 2 or 3 that we need to look at. And so this did not land easily, and it did not land well. And in fact, it probably only landed yesterday, which was, oh, okay, we can't just focus on innovation. We need to start off with quality. And so this construct of a playbook that has a game plan relative to where you find yourself as a business, so important.
And just to, I know just Mark Nolte and John O'Gorman and more on the west side, a lot of that was, a lot of data strategists talk about an offensive strategy or defensive strategy. Mark, I'm sure you related to that.
Yeah, Samir talks about that in his talks.
That's right. That's right. So it's interesting, and we had to explain to them what this difference was. So what we had to, for example, when we were doing a defensive, or we, instead of quality, we also called it regulatory, we had to now focus on getting the regulatory aspects right and not just driving business value. So we had to get this percentage understood, that they made certain decisions at this point in time to benefit regulation rather than driving business value. And then we started talking a little bit more, and they said they're not comfortable about the quality. So let's get this quality right. And then all of a sudden, the tasks and the deliverables that we had to create for this use case was a different set compared to let's just drive out value. So you even start to configure which deliverables are appropriate for this use case. And a good example of that, because in trying to get that, we would need to bring in more master data to get this right, and not try to fix it in a warehouse and then present it at a warehouse level and get the warehouse to do it. So we had to now take longer routes, longer elements to bring in, rather than just going straight to publish it into Excel, clean out the duplicates and try to move forward. So I'm hoping that explains this dynamic of playbooks, that how they're introduced into data management. So there's a set of decisions that the committee has to take, and when they prioritize the use cases, they have to keep that in mind and what this decision is.
Awesome, Howard. So we share that with you, and with Christine's creative flair, we bring in the construct of music. We needed it. Playbooks, I think from a sporting perspective, we understand, but it was such a good launching point, and just showing how your aspirations need to be couched in reality.
Yeah.
And so it's been a great way to convince the data executive to back and give the DMO air cover as they sort out some of the quality issues.
Yeah.
And just as an example, you know, when you're sitting listening to the entire business, and somebody mentions the trustworthiness of a particular data element in a particular way, and you see a whole lot of nodding, it's that nodding of, I know there's an issue.
Yeah.
I've experienced it. And so if you're telling me there isn't, I know you're not there. So just great way to kind of engage with a business audience where they know they've got some challenges to solve. And so what we see here, and I'm now linking it back to our data value-driven way, is you get a playbook for quality. And here we use the game plan that you adjust to, and we're using colors to depict the different styles that you adjust to. In the top row is different to the playbook for innovation, which takes the game plans for innovation, and you tweak.
You configure.
Yeah.
You configure the way.
What's the word I used for this bottom thing?
Tune.
Tune.
Fine tune, yeah.
Thank you so much. Good. And then once you've done that, what happens is you come into what we call a bunch of plays. It's the matrix, there's steps, and sometimes there's a sequence of steps. Doesn't matter, that complexity sits within the realm of a data professional. Don't worry about that. You get your inputs and you're able to do this. And we're going to touch on just now in terms of when you come into a requirement like this, we started to speculate that we've been asked to help with meeting the first level of compliance.
Yeah.
And we realized, oh my word, this is actually going to be done annually.
Yeah.
And it's going to need to, and so therefore there's this continuous compliance, continuous transformation, and therefore one should start thinking early about how you bake the data in to make sure that your product scales. And so we defined value, and I'm going to just touch on this quickly with respect to we needed a reference frame for definition of value.
Taxonomy.
Our value taxonomy.
Yeah.
Thank you. So our value taxonomy is quite rudimentary now. Don, please don't judge us just yet. We're getting better. But our value taxonomy was necessary to illustrate how we're going to value our use cases, what we're using, and it was quite interesting that business comes along really easily. They just get it and they go, okay, you're going to do it like that. And we asked them, do you have a different opinion? They went, no, it's okay, it's good to go. And so revenue growth, operating margin, capital efficiencies are relatively good top level items to do, or categorizations, top level of your taxonomy, going into volume, price, cost of sale, and so on. So we just used conventional shareholder value mapping in order to value the product.
Now, what is interesting there is other areas that we're starting to look at from a shareholder value point of view is the asset utilization. And of course, because you're now producing data assets and data products, there is a way of measuring and understanding the shareholder value for data assets and data products. So, I mean, the finance people and the product people are really good at having that understanding on how to sweat their asset.
Yeah.
And I think all of us talk about, oh, right, if you got this data asset, then you've got another set of dynamics that you have to work on, that the CFO is going to ask you questions on how are you sweating this asset and how much money is it making? And if you can't describe the value, you're going to battle to answer those questions. So we can have these glib things of, oh, we're building data assets, but what does it mean? How does the CFO relate to this?
And so we're hoping, and this is something that we'll look at and maybe consider how it is, this asset utilization is such a key part of measuring the success of the data asset that we actually think that from a data product perspective, we can enhance this, and look forward to doing that over the next couple of weeks potentially. And then to make the value real, we went through a payback period and ROI calculation. And as anybody would know, you're looking for that point where your cash flow and your crosses the x-axis. And here, for the particular use case that we were doing the analysis for, we based on the input of assumptions, it's a 2.3 year payback period with an ROI of 15. And we then take those inputs, or we take those outputs, and we use them as inputs for the use case prioritization.
And the commercial feasibility.
Commercial feasibility.
So we first of all look at the technical implementation feasibility using a DMMA. And then we look at, to bring the other side, we look at a commercial feasibility using cost benefit analysis, ROI, payback periods.
And what's really nice is we're sitting with the exec a couple of hours ago, and he goes, oh, don't you want to just give me a summary of the use case? No. It's really easy to summarize. That's the use case, that's the payback. No. And so we wait for comment from that. So this is the complexity where you're starting to see asset efficiency. And
expectations are an interesting one. See, that's also a shareholder value. I'm not sure how to measure the value of expectations.
So this project has shown us that where we started is not good enough to where we need to end. And so it will be somewhere there, and we look forward to sharing and learning with you as we do that. So if we move along in terms of finding the value, this one's quite simple. We've covered it in the past, and that's got to do with which dimension do you bias, and is your most kind of is it operational excellence? Is it product leadership? Is it client intimacy? Because each of those have different nuances with respect to the data products that you prioritize. So really important to know that you are supporting a data product that is against or aligned with your primary commercial initiative. And when we now say, if you as an executive know what your strategic alignment, what is the strategic alignment that you are looking to achieve, what decisions do you then need to support, and what a level of uncertainty do you need to embrace? And for today's call, I think we might not go into it in detail, but I'd like to just add two dimensions to the executive's dilemma. Is when an executive is looking to base decisions on a particular environment that they find themselves in, there's two things that they are asking is, what's the likelihood of this happening? And there you see the y-axis is talking about feasible, plausible, and unimaginable. And if you have a look at the state of the information or the quality of the question, is it's either known, I could know it, I don't know it right now, so it's knowable, or it's unknowable. And I thought that this matrix was quite a nice way of just considering the different questions that are needing to be considered as an executive navigates their world. And you know, if you just take known and plausible, it's like contingency planning. So that would fit well within the construct of some of the business process optimization. Is like, what contingency do I have? What's enough? Am I well protected? Am I risk mitigated? Versus you know, the middle top, which is it's knowable and it's feasible, you know, rapid response and deployment. And how I remember you saying that as soon as you're dealing with high feasible, it's knowable. That's where
that's that planned response. And you use the technology called digital decision to actually make those decisions for you. So now with this matrix, you not only can you understand the inventory of the decision, but you can also understand the type of analytical processes that you can apply. So we always find a lot of times when I help go and set up an AI strategy, it's like people are not really saying, well, let's analyze the decision and then choose the approach according to the state of our information, the likelihood, the method that we need to do. So there's lots of considerations that we need to bring in. You're not going to be using predictable, for example, in a highly plausible or elements like that. You're not going to use prediction. You're going to use exploratory techniques, exploratory analytics instead of confirmatory analytics for digital decision.
And you know how I get a sense that we, you know, each time we get to this part of the presentation, we go into our Cynefin type diagram, and I think that we might actually need to offer the, you know, maybe even start with that, and that could well be, you know, maybe we do need to come into some decision management methodologies as so if anybody out there is good at that, we'd love to join you. Love to join you all that. Cool, thanks, Howard.
Yeah, so that's really just the flow that we take them on the decision framework. You can see that Cynefin diagram, and this is part of us helping answer the BIA compliance or the business intelligence and analytics. They want to know what methods, what techniques you're using, how do you apply it to descriptive analytics, predictive, prescriptive, cognitive, and those different areas. And you need to explain not just the type of analytics, but the techniques that you're using. All right,
cool. So, and I think we'll cover that in detail. So, yeah, thank you. Drive value. So, what we've seen here, and I mentioned it at the start, and I'm going to start wrapping now, is there are two entities that both need management because they are both valuable, and that is the data asset and the data management process. The next slide, please. What we thought is these two icons have been with us from the beginning. I mean, we started this 4 weeks ago. It feels like a long time, but we started this presentation with those two icons. And what we've done is we've introduced the data value-driven management playbook. We've introduced the concept of why a playbook was necessary. But these two icons have been quite galvanizing in terms of there are two things that one must do. And they happen in parallel. Increase the data assets value, and you do that by walking through each stage of the data value-driven way.
Of the data, information, knowledge, and wisdom, and we walk through that.
And
it was really interesting when we were talking to trying to explain it to people, how we could show them, okay, you start with your data assets, you start with your data set being contract details about the contract. And then notice how when you add on the trending and the analytics, now you're starting to build your information and knowledge. So that's how we get the patterns. And so it was really helpful as we show them the components of the build of the data asset. then all of a sudden this thing becomes real. And now I can see what the difference is between information, knowledge, and wisdom. And just that little bit of extra information, as long as it's saved in the time series database, that time series growth and projection that we're coming out, there's the next level of data asset growth and direction.
Perfect. And the last point, I'm going to show you that when you do a use case retrospective on your use case, we haven't had the luxury of doing that yet because I'm still busy, but what we have seen is actually how it bakes data in by default. And so I thought that we would actually finish today's webinar just showing how we've needed to, in the construct of this project, because so much needed to be done in such a short space of time, we actually lent on data to bake it in and really keep us alive. And so if you could just show us and show that this next one is bacon. And so what you're looking at here is you're looking at the amount of work to be done and keeping track of a distributed team, all working on compliance, all individually, bringing these things through, dropping them into a particular environment, using the data maturity process of, now you need to help me. One is the repeatable.
The actual levels. So we have absent, which is level 0. Then we go into ad hoc, which are processes that are done once or twice, but there's just no agreement or understanding. Then you go into repeatable, which is a suggested process, but it's not applied across the organization. And then you're going to define.
And so even in our own ways of work to submit this project, we were using data management techniques to do it. And
so just to show you guys here, this is 771 columns that had to be completed across a whole series of submission documents. And we had to get all of these columns and inputs done. And we had to get them aligned and all documented and things like that. So it was our ability to manage our submission progress to be able to submit all of this information. And notice how you got by knowledge area, we've got 195 inputs for data operations, 187 for governance. And so we go down the process of understanding all of these deliverables. Now that form at the end there is basically an area within an Excel or a Word document, which is a submission to the regulator. We go down to that form level. This is an area on the spreadsheet. And then the last one is the different inputs that are required. So these are the different columns that needed to be completed.
Just shared for an example of how it doesn't matter what part of a data lifecycle project you are, you can bake the data in. And when you bake the data in, you get this positive feedback loop, which creates value on its own and in fact starts to inform potential data products that you didn't even see.
Yeah, and I mean, some of the things that we had to basically implement is, guys, don't hard code anything. Don't build your things because they had to, because of this requirement for continuous regulation, we couldn't hard code anything from a PowerPoint slide to whatever it was. We had to build this from metadata.
I'm just hearing what you're saying. So, I mean, you've actually created compounded value.
Yeah.
Because as it's replicated and integrated this way, it's like compounded interest.
And the important point is that our people that take over sustainability compliance had to now build a new use case and build a new set of CDEs and build a new set of elements that they need to resubmit next year or whenever it is. And so they couldn't keep on going and building these inputs every single time they wanted to do it.
So I think that brings us to the full 360 around this project. We looked at it from a data management perspective. We looked at it from a data citizen. We looked at it from a data professional, and now we've just finished looking at it from a data executive. And so we're hoping that this has encouraged and has inspired. As much as we've been inspired to be on the project, we're hoping that we've been able to share this with you. As we said, it's come off the production line. There's a lot of things, and that playbook development happened I don't even know what day we're in. What is today?
Was it a week? Just say a week or two.
No, it was 3 or 4 days ago.
Wow.
Yeah, so because we just saw the clients struggling to land this, and why, with the perception.
The fiat,
Yeah, they weren't getting it.
The perception was, why are you complex? And so that's what we've done. So maybe we can just stop there. Kind of that's the wrap of the 4 different views of this particular data value driven way. And we stand here as testament that we've used it, we needed it, we've used it, we've deployed it, and the client is going, I like it. And so that's been really it's been vindication for the work that we needed to do. But it would be really great to just go through some questions. Are there?
No, there aren't any questions at the moment. We're hoping there may be a few. Otherwise, we'll do this. We pick on you.
It's called popcorn.
Yeah. Mark. We've got Mark Atkins. Yes, love to hear your question.
Yes. So look, this has been a fantastic presentation. It's very early in the morning here now, so my brain is a bit bedaddled, but very fascinating, and it's a great team effort what you've done there. Now, my question is around looking at the playbook and your innovation, and driving everything from regulatory benefits versus business value. Is that the way I see that is, rather than being a data-driven thing, this has been, when you talk about data value-driven, is like it's business outcome-driven data rather than data-driven business outcome. Is that right? Have I understood that correctly?
Maybe if I could ask you a few questions before I say
Sure.
yes. So what we're trying to define here is that seeking and finding our value in the work that we're doing is then configuring the process of data management. So the elements that we decide to do are dependent on the value. Now, on the value that we're deriving from the work. Now, when we had the regulation, what was driving us was risk measurements within the business. So it wasn't monetary value that we were going to get money from the customers. We used business process optimization, and an element of business process optimization. There were 3 elements it breaks down to. It breaks down in terms of fixing the cost, but it also relates to risk management, and the other one was change management. So those are the 3 elements that one talks about with business process optimization. So our focus was for the regulatory side, because they were going to get penalty for not being compliant. So the value that they were getting out of choosing a more regulatory driven one, where we had to push out all of the policies and procedures and things like that, instead of going straight into the analytical side of it, was in establishing all the data management foundations. Mark, I'm hoping I've answered your question.
I think you have, and I think you've explained it back to me the way I'm understanding it, and it's very in line with my thinking. So this has been really, really good and enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you. But also, just to say to you, they because they're new in this field, everything's about developing business definitions of the terminology in the language and things like that. So what is a data asset? What is a data product? There's lots of those skills that we're now having to put in place and get going.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Caroline.
Yeah, very good presentation. I'm very glad I jumped into this one. And as always, I think I've picked up 80% of what you guys actually were talking about. I always feel like I'm sort of dealing with beautiful mind territory when I talk to you guys. But what's a couple of just things that stuck out to me that I think Christine would appreciate is, we're talking at a strategic level here and an executive level, and the amount of the importance placed on language and using imagery that speaks to the people that you're talking to, and placing meaning on words, because I think we leverage best practices, and things like Playbook come into our vocabulary with a particular meaning, which stemmed from a particular culture with a particular imagery in mind. And the shift to using music to explain it for this audience, I think, is a very important point when it comes to stakeholder engagement and buy-in. And I liked that it worked both ways. I liked that, you know, you had to, you know, data quality. As soon as you started talking about, is it trustworthy? Can you trust your data? You know, that people were nodding their heads. It was the picture I picked up. The business owners were kind of going, yeah, is the data trustworthy? That's a good point. But then on the reverse of that, saying, you know, if the data management team is saying, well, we have a data asset, having the finance manager going, okay, cool, it's an asset, prove it. You know, treat it like an asset, you know, because asset for a finance manager is a whole different ballgame. And even the word product, you know, product has a very particular, I like that sort of, you know, how do we monetize it? Like, how does this become something we can sell? It's not a product until you sell it.
Yes.
So yeah, I really like that, the merging of the terminologies. And in my mind, I think this is the maturing of data-driven business, you know, that the maturing of the digitalization thing we've been going through. It is when we merge our IT data technical vocabulary with that of the business, flowing both ways. And you end up with a unified way of gaining value, and I really like that angle on it.
And it was fascinating, Caroline. For the first time, when we presented directors, we actually had the marketing director. It wasn't the director, it was someone representing it, and his comment was, "We've got to get our communication right. We've got to all agree on how we communicate to our partners, to the public, to everybody." He was adamant that we get this right. So it was lovely, again, that the people are paying attention to the right things and the right language that we use. And I know part of the sharing with Mark Atkins on how passionate he is about defining things properly. He gives us tools on how to define it. So he helps us a lot there in terms of getting that business definition language. So he's got some variants that he uses.
The glossary, it's really interesting. So yeah, I'm feeling vindicated in choosing to go for a social sciences communication science degree rather than a BSc computer science degree. I feel like it's not wrong.
Well done. Thank you. Okay, any other questions, comments? Terence, what about you, sir?
That's what I love. Terence, what are you?
He's hiding.
No, I'm good, thanks.
Nothing from you. All right. Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, no problem. Good to chat. Any other comment? Should we close up? If there's not another question, should we ask just for comments? Christine, any lasting comments?
I just wanted to share the culture nuance here in Saudi. And Caroline, you know, what you brought up is so true. But added to that is this dimension of the culture that is really different to ours.
Yes.
In so many ways, we learn all the time. And I mean, it's not even practical things like we don't share toilets, the ladies have their own section, some dressed in a very, you know, with a burqa, very Saudi way. And then others are quite Western. And it's because there's so much going on culturally, the words we use. We had a fun word called yalla.
Yeah.
You know, yalla? Yalla muni kumni?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yalla. It's a great term. I use it all the time.
and just nuances on words, actions, sayings, and interaction. There's a definite difference. It's slower. It's more deliberate. But what really surprised me is I was comparing them to other Arab countries, and they are incredibly bright, incredibly hardworking themselves. And so you don't know until you get to a place really what the culture's like. Yeah. So I just
not really. I mean, I was on a long-term project based in Doha in Qatar, and we had a multicultural team, Singapore, Mexican, British, American, South African, Northern Ireland. So it was a real mishmash in the team itself. And yeah, it's very interesting watching the dynamics unfold within, like, you're now the subcultures inside a different, kingdom. And the nuances that come out, and just the way that you express things. I think, you become much more aware of your vocabulary, and you become much more aware of what am I actually communicating here.
Correct.
Yeah, super interesting.
Thank you. JG, anything from your side?
No, I think that's good enough today. No. Real privilege to be able to just share as we go. So great, thank you for the forum to do that. So can't appreciate everybody's time enough to just say thank you.
Yeah, and especially to Mark Atkins for going to bed so late, and Mark Melvin for waking up so early.
Go to bed, guys, go to bed.
Thanks,
Yeah,
everybody.
I'm off now. I've got another one in about 6.5 hours, so I'm going to go and get some sleep.
Right,
Thanks ever so much, guys. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Bye.